As most of you know, I've had the opportunity to serve as the chairman of the National Governors Association, a great distinct honor for me by my peers. And one of the great blessings of that is not only being able to belong to this organization, but to get to know on a very personal level other governors who are leading this great country. And again, we've got some remarkable people out there as part of the National Governors Association. And one of those is Governor Mike Pence from Indiana. I have a great affection for Governor Pence as a man of faith, a man of character, and his wisdom and experience because of what he's done in his own life is really quite remarkable. As some of you know, he served in Congress for 12 years. Again, respected by his peers and elected to positions of leadership in the Congress. I like the fact that he's been consistently conservative. I would say that as a conservative Republican, but I like consistency, the phrase I was taught when I was young, consistency, thou art a jewel. Again, the fact that he's been a consistent conservative and consistent in his life's practice has been impressive to me. He's the 50th governor elected in the great state of Indiana. He's brought the same skill set that he demonstrated in Congress and in his private life to that job of being governor of the state of Indiana. It's not lost on me that his fiscal conservativeness has helped lead Indiana in economic recovery and growth. He is like Utah, one of only 9 states that have a AAA bond rating today. That's a great foundation upon which to build. He also recognized the importance of education and the need for us to have a skilled labor force in order to have long-term sustained economic growth. And he should understand that because his wife, Karen, the First Lady of Indiana, is a school teacher. And she understands and has been involved in the classroom for many years and understands that from a front row basis. Again, Mike's become a good friend of mine, one who I admire. And I know he likes Utah, the things that we're doing in Utah and what he's done in Indiana. His value system, his conservative approach as a man of faith lines up very well with the culture here in Utah. So it's my distinct honor to welcome to the great state of Utah and to this conference my good friend, Governor Mike Pence. Please make him feel welcome.
Governor Gary Herbert, everybody. Isn't he something? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of the 3rd Annual Utah Solutions Summit. It is a joy to be with all of you, and thank you for supporting the kind of leadership in this state that is personified in Gary and Jeanette Herbert. I arrived in time to hear the kind words, and I can tell you that Abraham Lincoln said memorably his only ambition in life was to be esteemed by those he esteemed, and to have the esteem of really one of the premier governors in the United States of America, someone who is respected by his peers in both political parties, and ensures every day that Utah is a tough competitor for states like Indiana and around the country is deeply meaningful to me. So, Gary, thank you so very much. Thanks for the hospitality today and for those kind words. I'm also grateful for Senator Mike Lee's invitation, his great leadership on this Utah Solutions Summit, and just appreciate his strong conservative leadership on the national stage. Utah should be proud of the leadership of both of your senators, of a great delegation in Washington, D.C. So join me in giving Senator Lee, our host, and all of your delegation a great round of applause. I know I'm Carly Fiorina's warm-up act today, and so I'm very excited about that. I had a chance a little bit ago to catch up with Carly. She's one of the most dynamic conservative voices in the United States of America, and I know you're excited to hear from her today. But I'm very, very honored to be able to share the podium with my friend Carly Fiorina as well. Let me also say to all of you, if you were here at this hour to see Luke Skywalker, you're in the wrong room. I did hear on the news this morning, it's the first time my name has appeared in the same sentence as Mark Hamill, but apparently he's at the same conference center here. Big Star Trek fan, though, or Star Wars fan, and for that matter, a Star Trek fan, as you could tell. But just wanted to make sure, if you were in the wrong room, make sure to move you on. I am thrilled today as well to be joined when we talk about education. That's what I'm going to share with you, some of our experience in the Hoosier State and some of the experience that we've had talking about education around the country in the context of a national campaign. I'm particularly excited today to be joined by my favorite teacher in the world, and that is my wife of 31 years, Karen Pence, who's with us today. Karen she's taught mostly second grade level elementary school. She was an art teacher for about 10 years and is herself an accomplished artist, but is truly a remarkable educator. And as governor of the state of Indiana, and as we begin to talk about policies about education at the national level, I can tell you, having a school teacher at my side who reminds me that all the policy prescriptions in the world, all the innovations and state-based innovations, which we'll talk about in a minute today, don't matter one iota to making sure that you have a great teacher in every classroom in America. It's the teachers that make the difference, and being married to a great teacher has taught me that for these many years. So, also, I'm delighted to be joined by two of our three kids. One is going to be a senior in college this year, Audrey, and another just graduated from college and is gainfully employed, which I'm very excited about. But our daughter Audrey and our daughter Charlotte are also here today, and I just mentioned them mostly I mention them like a dad does, just to embarrass them. And so thanks for making the Pence family feel so welcome. It really is a delight to be with all of you today. And let me also say, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but Utah really has set the pace for states around the country. The Utah model, the Indiana model, we call Indiana a state that works. Utah is a state that works, and it's not just those balanced budgets. Gary and I have the privilege of both leading states, a handful of states in America that have a AAA bond rating. But the growth in this economy, the pro-business environment, the commitment to education, innovation, and reform that's at the foundation of the prosperity of this state and my state, really has inspired states all across the country. And so I want to congratulate all of you here in Utah for supporting the kind of leadership at the state and local level that's really been able to make that kind of a difference. And let me just say, while it's been the greatest privilege that I ever thought that I would have would be to be governor of the state that I love. You can imagine, or maybe you can't imagine, but the experience that we had the night that we got that phone call and were asked to be the running mate of the Republican nominee for President of the United States. It was deeply humbling for us. We had taken the matter to prayer in case the call came, and when it came, we took it right to prayer right after that. And but I have to tell you, the journey that we've been on, it was 6 weeks ago last night that I accepted my party's nomination for Vice President of the United States, has been an incredible privilege for me to be able to stand with Donald Trump, a broad-shouldered American leader who truly believes in the American dream, who believes in the boundless potential of every American, who gets to get a good education, to get a good foundation in their life, to be able to achieve their dreams has been an incredible joy for me. But I want to share with you a little bit today about my experience in education. in the state of Indiana, but also the passion that Donald Trump and I have for education, innovation, and reform. But it all really begins with a belief that Donald Trump and I share, that while Washington, D.C., since the Carter administration forward, has on an increasing basis until very recently been taking more and more control over education, Donald Trump and I both believe that education is a state and local function that should be controlled by parents and by teachers and by administrators in our local communities and in our local states. We believe it. I mean, the Department of Education actually was founded. A lot of people think it was Ben Franklin's idea, don't they, Gary? But it was actually founded under the administration of President Jimmy Carter. And I can tell you my experience on Capitol Hill, having brought that principle that Donald Trump and I feel so passionately to my service in the Congress of the United States, actually put me at loggerheads with the president of my own party in my very first year as a member of Congress. It would be 2001, and George W. Bush, who I greatly admire, became president of the United States. His number one legislative priority was a bill called No Child Left Behind. And it was a bill that essentially was the largest increase in the Federal Department of Education since it was founded under Jimmy Carter. And I can tell you that as a freshman member of Congress, the president of your party has their number one priority. You're kind of expected to go along. But because I believed in that principle of federalism and that principle of local control of education, I and a few dozen other Republicans actually opposed No Child Left Behind. And I couldn't be more pleased that over the last year, the Congress of the United States, with the strong support of people like Senator Mike Lee, essentially began the process of repealing No Child Left Behind. And they, according to the Wall Street Journal, passed legislation that was the biggest de-evolution of authority over education back to the states since the Department of Education was formed in Washington, D.C. And that was an incredible accomplishment. But we've all lived through this season of wider control. My lodestar when I was in the Congress, I served 12 years in Congress, and I've been 4 years as governor of the great state of Indiana. But in my years in the Congress, my attitude about education was always resources, not red tape. You know, if the money that the people of Utah, the people of Indiana send our tax dollars to Washington, D.C., if you want to send some of it back and we'll invest in our schools, we're more than happy to have that. But not the red tape, not the control, and that when it comes to standards and when it comes to curriculum, that those matters are best decided and best developed, as you've done here in Utah, as we've done in the state of Indiana at the state level. And I just want you to know that Donald Trump and I believe that to our bone marrow, and it really derives from that principle of innovation and seeing states as the laboratories of innovation in this great democracy that we have. But the truth is, and then once you make it clear about where education needs to be improved, it's important that we speak to one another plainly about the need for a solution summit, the need for us to talk about education reform. I pulled a few stats in anticipation of today. Despite the fact that the United States today ranks 5th in per pupil spending around the globe, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development Nations, among the 34 nations on that list, and the 27 countries actually outperformed U.S. students in math, and 17 countries outperformed U.S. students in reading. That gives you some sense that the dollars that we are investing are not necessarily the problem. And I don't mean to gainsay that there aren't schools in Utah and schools in Indiana and a lot of states around the country that could use a few extra dollars. But it is to say that dollars alone are not the answer. Because to see that level of performance, and that was actually in the what's called the Program for International Student Assessment, we can see that American students are falling behind in objective ways to students around the world. And so my view is, and I know Donald Trump's view as well, is it's not so much what we're spending on education as how we're spending it and who's spending the dollars. The first principle that I already articulated is that we truly believe that education is a state and local function. But I also do believe that once that's put into effect, I can tell you that expanding the choices for parents in education within our schools and beyond our schools is at the very center of what we believe will reinvigorate education. Donald Trump and I both believe that every parent in America should be able to choose where their children go to school regardless of their income, regardless of their area code, and public, private, and parochial and faith-based schools on the list. I truly do believe, and Donald Trump, I can tell you, was one of our very first conversations, is passionate about school choice. In a major address to the nation last night, he just made an offhand comment about the cost of illegal immigration in our country and how much that could support school choice if those resources were to become available. A school choice for me is not just about vouchers, although I will tell you that we're very proud of the fact that the state of Indiana is home to one of the largest school voucher programs in America. In fact, some people actually think the whole educational voucher movement was germinated in the state of Indiana. It's an interesting story. Back in the early 1990s, the now late J. Patrick Rooney, an insurance executive, had been lobbying for school choice for many years in the state of Indiana. And he finally gave up on it, at least at that moment in time, and he put $1 million of his own money in a private foundation, and he agreed to do matching grants for students to be able to choose where their children went to school. That was in the early 1990s. The Educational Choice Charitable Trust was, to my knowledge, the first privately funded school choice scholarship program in America. It would inspire other scholarship programs around the country, the Walton family having been enormously generous in that regard as well. But today, Indiana, I'm proud to say, has more than 33,000 students enrolled in our voucher program, opening doors of opportunities to children around the state of Indiana who would not otherwise be able to go to the school of their choice in a private school. I also want to commend Governor Herbert for the extraordinary leadership that Utah has provided on charter schools in this state. The broad range of public charter schools that are available in Utah is an enormous statement about a belief in choice, a belief in giving parents within a public charter school system the opportunity to choose different schools that best fit the needs and the vision and the aspiration and the talents of their children. And I can tell you, in the state of Indiana, we have a vibrant charter school program. But we greatly admire Governor Herbert's leadership on charter school education in this state as well. But school choice for me and in the state of Indiana is not just limited to choices between different public schools, between a traditional public school and a charter school, or between a public school and a private school with a school choice scholarship. But rather, we've sought in Indiana to expand the choices for families within public education. I'm someone who over the last 4 years has learned about the importance of early childhood education. You know, I'll always believe that the best pre-K program is a prosperous family that can provide children the enrichment in the home that every child needs and deserves. But what I came to realize after becoming governor of the state of Indiana, traveling all across our state, is that for too many families struggling to make ends meet, that's often not the case. And children will start in kindergarten in my home state, literally start out behind, and they tend to fall back very quickly. And at the end of the day, there's a strong correlation between children who did not have the enrichment in the home and the very children who will end up dropping out of school and not finishing. And so in the state of Indiana, I was proud that under our administration, we launched the first ever publicly funded pre-K pilot program in the history of our state. And I expect that my successor as governor will be working to build on that. Again, with the principle that providing public resources for families who would not otherwise be able to choose the opportunity of a quality pre-K program. We've also fought for new pathways within our public high schools. And in the last budget that I signed in the state of Indiana, we expanded our state's commitment to career and technical education. Now, Gary and I are about the same age. I'm uncoachable in this sense. I call it career and vocational education. Because when I was growing up in a small town in southern Indiana with a couple of big manufacturing companies located right there, it was vocational education. And somewhere along the way, and I haven't yet figured out when it happened, but somewhere along the way in the late 1970s, our high schools in Indiana, and I think secondary education around the country, largely moved away from career education and vocational education. I mean, I can tell you that when I was growing up in Columbus, Indiana, you would walk through the main doors of the high school. Some of us would turn left and go down and study AP English, and others would turn right and go down to what they used to call industrial arts, remember? We'd all eat in the same cafeteria. We'd all cheer at the same basketball games. We all walked across the same stage, got the same diploma. And some of the best friends of my life went on to terrific careers, have actually reached a point where they've been able to retire after 30 years and start businesses of their own and built wonderful lives and made great incomes in local companies. And others of us I went down to a little college in southern Indiana, studied American history, which with a degree in American history, I was actually able to get a job at the college. That was, and then went to law school and pursued my own path. But I'm someone who believed and pursued over the last 4 years the notion that our schools ought to work just as well for our kids that want to get a job as for our kids that want to go on in their education. And so we sought in the state of Indiana to make career and vocational and technical education a priority in our schools once again. And we did it in a couple of different ways. Not only did we include about $50 million more in the budget for schools to create new programs and new pathways, but also we created incentives, which I would commend to your attention, where now with schools offer career and technical courses in areas that are relevant to jobs in that community, they actually receive more per pupil hour than they would otherwise. And we created a career council and works councils on a regional basis to identify those career opportunities. And we created partnerships with post-secondary institutions to offer dual credit courses in our high schools, to give students an opportunity to be able to graduate from high school with not only a diploma, but also, as in cases like Ben Davis University High School now and the Batesville High School, almost every graduate in the next year from those high schools will graduate with an industry-recognized credential and a diploma from that high school. It gives them the opportunity to either move immediately into the workplace or move on to post-secondary education that Gary and I strongly support and pursue that degree with even a stronger foundation to be able to do that. It really is amazing. I was in Kokomo, Indiana last year, and they have a vigorous career and technical program. And they have a welding program there. And for those of you that know manufacturing, you know there's a great shortage of welders in this country. And people that work in welding make a really good income. And so this program in Kokomo, Indiana was a welding program. But as I walked through the program, half of the students that I talked to, you know, with the hoods on and you know, doing the practical application, half of the students were prepared to go on to a 2-year program in welding beyond high school. The other half that I talked to were all going to Purdue University to study engineering. They just wanted to get their hands on. They wanted to get their hands on what engineering looks like at the practical level. And so for me, it's been a real passion in the state of Indiana, is opening up doors of opportunity to make sure that our schools work for all of our kids, regardless of where they start in life, but also regardless of where they want to start in life. that regardless of where they start in life, we've opened up doors of opportunities through school choice and our scholarship programs, through investing in the first ever pre-K funding for disadvantaged kids in the state of Indiana so they can start on success, to begin to close that achievement gap. But beyond that, making sure that our high schools work just as well for our kids that want to pursue a career or a trade as they do for kids that want to continue to pursue education. And I think that dialing all of this in is going to be an essential part of states like mine, states like Utah, and states all over the country, continuing to meet the needs of a growing American economy. Because this is obviously a very challenging time in the life of our nation. I can tell you, quite honestly, whatever progress we've made in the state of Indiana, and we've made a lot in the last 4 years, and Utah has made a lot. It's actually, I believe, been in spite of the policies coming out of Washington, D.C. in most cases, not because of it. I mean, we actually had our RV industry recently. We have a great tradition of craftsmanship in northern Indiana that goes back generations. And we're literally the RV capital of the world in Elkhart, Indiana. You should visit it sometime. We've got a Hall of Fame. It's very exciting. 80% of our RV exports come out of the state of Indiana, and that's about the market share that Indiana has in the RV industry. It's a very proud part of our economy. But President Barack Obama had come to Elkhart, Indiana during the deepest trough of the Great Recession, when unemployment was just frighteningly high in that community. But now Elkhart has come back. And so when the president came back a few months ago, I had an editorial welcoming him back to town, very gracious, as the governor should. And I said, I'm very pleased that you're here, and assumed that the president would be taking some credit for the growth of and the revival of the Elkhart economy. But I did tell local reporters that I didn't think that the president's tax increases or regulations or Obamacare or other policies coming out of our nation's capital were really responsible for the revival of the Elkhart economy or Indiana's economy. I think it probably had more to do with the fact that in Indiana we've been cutting taxes, we've been rolling back red tape, we've been making investments in education, innovation, and reform, including career and technical education. And the fact that we're at record employment in the state of Indiana is mostly a testament to the hardworking people of our state, to their resilience, to their ingenuity. And we said that and had a good debate when the president was there. But at the end of the day, I would submit to all of you that that which you are talking about here today at this Solutions Summit, at least with regard to education, is going to be an essential part of a growing American economy when we have new leadership in our nation's capital. Because the choice in this election in terms of economic policies, and as you'll hear in more detail in the coming weeks from Donald Trump on education policy, really couldn't be more dramatic. I saw that in high relief. Donald Trump laid out in Detroit an economic plan to lower taxes across the board for working families, small businesses, and family farms, lowering to 3 marginal tax rates, repealing death taxes at the federal level, and lowering the business tax, which Governor Herbert and I would very much like to see, down to 15% so American businesses can keep jobs in America. A moratorium on new regulation out of Washington, D.C., repealing all of the Obama executive orders that are stifling our economy, ending the war on coal, and having the kind of trade deals that will ensure that American trade negotiations work for American workers. The contrast on the other side is very clear. $1 trillion in tax increases, more than $1 trillion in new spending, more regulation, more Obamacare, and more of the war on energy that's been stifling growth in our economy. But when we choose the new national leadership, and I believe that we will on November 8th, and when we get a fresh start, and we start to drive toward a growing economy, I truly do believe that state-based innovation, particularly in the area of education, will be essential in the states that are in the forefront, as Utah already is, as I'm proud to say Indiana already is, will be the states that achieve the greatest and most rapid success. And so I want to encourage you in that regard. And also I want to encourage you to approach these issues always in not just economic terms, but also in the kind of terms that can best be described as moral terms. I mean, a commitment that we have to make sure that every child has access to a world-class education is a moral commitment. I mean, I have to tell you, I was incredibly proud of my running mate just a few short weeks ago, being willing to speak plainly and truthfully about the challenges facing many of our minority communities in many of our largest cities around the country. The fact that too many in our major cities are facing not only unsafe streets and a lack of economic opportunities, but also failing schools. And the other party, with a strong alignment to the National Education Association and the Teachers Union, literally continues to stand in the way, denying educational choice to those very families that they say that they represent. I saw that firsthand when I was in Washington, D.C. I was in the Congress when we were able to start the District of Columbia Educational Scholarship Program. The District of Columbia is a predominantly African-American community and with a great tradition and a great history. But the schools there face real challenges. And because the District of Columbia is essentially under the jurisdiction of and the control of the federal government, the Congress in this one instance was able to create a scholarship program, to create school choice scholarship vouchers for disadvantaged children in the District of Columbia. And it was truly incredible. 91% of students participating in that program, they call it the Opportunity Scholarship Program, actually have graduated versus 64% of the D.C. public school kids. Early on in the program, we began to see extraordinary results. But when the other party got in charge, things changed. They immediately shut down this administration and the Democrats, when they took control of the Congress, shut down the D.C. Scholarship Program. I'll never forget a meeting that I had when I was on Capitol Hill in 2010 with African-American parents who came to Capitol Hill for the sole and exclusive reason to look legislators in the eye and ask them to reopen this program for their children. They said they couldn't find a way to explain to their kids why their older sibling was able to go to the private school down the street. But now, because of decisions in an administration in Washington, D.C., they couldn't join their sibling at that school. I'll never forget one mother came up to me and literally just said, "Congressman, please do something about this." And my heart broke for those families. Well, we had an election in 2010, and we had a change of management on Capitol Hill, I'm proud to say. And in 2011, with a Republican majority on Capitol Hill, we put the District of Columbia Scholarship Program back in place. And we opened those doors of opportunity for those disadvantaged kids. And the results have been extraordinary. And so I just encourage each one of you, as you think about education and think about solutions, think about those individual families and the right of every family to be able to choose where their children go to school. It's something Donald Trump and I, in one of our very first conversations, we found complete alignment on. He has a passion for school choice that proceeds, I think, out of his deep devotion to his own children. And I think the sense that he has that the education that he was given growing up created the foundation on which he was able to build on what his father and his grandfather who came to this country had built. And so I encourage you to think in those ways. And last thing I would say to all of you is just keep inspiring. There's an old proverb I like that says that iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And Utah is a state that truly inspires other states around the country. The Utah model and under your governor, Gary Herbert, and the great leadership you have here, has demonstrated that you can have government as good as your people. You can live within your means. You can let people keep more of what they earn. You can see a growing economy and a pro-business environment. And yes, you can see schools that open doors of opportunities for families of every background and every experience. Utah has inspired in so many ways the nation from early in education all the way through higher education. I encourage you to keep inspiring. And lastly, I encourage you also in these challenging times in our nation to to do what I know so many people in Utah do and the Pence family does, and that is bend the knee. You know, and I don't ask you today to pray for any one candidate or any one cause, but I do encourage you in the 68 days that remain in this campaign to pray for our country, to pray that we would see our way through these times, because I believe today what I've always believed, and that is that if His people who are called by His name will humble themselves and pray, He will hear again from heaven, and He'll heal our land. I believe it with all my heart. So thank you very much. Thank you for the honor of being with you here today, and much, much continued success to all of you and to the great state of Utah. God bless you all.